and keep it to the very end.
Okay.
On congestion. Okay.
Okay. It looks like we're about to go onto YouTube.
I think we're live. We are live, Steve.
Okay, so good evening, neighbors. It is good to at least see a good number of you here who are members of the Upper West Side Coalition of Block Associations and Community Groups. We are all about block associations and community groups on the Upper West Side. And tonight we have a very special guest with our Congressman, Jerry Nadler, who we are thrilled to have. But first and foremost, to those people who are joining us, if you are interested in forming a block association, if you would like to strengthen your block association, if you would like to just find out what the Upper West Side Coalition is doing, please go to our website, upperwestsidecoalition.org. You can see our newsletters. You can see the YouTube recordings of the forums that we've had with a variety of subjects who are answering questions from Upper West Siders. If you'd like to email us, upperwestsidecoalition@gmail.com. We have a newsletter that comes out every month. We would like to share that with you. So please be in touch. We are waiting for our guest to arrive from the House floor, where he has just completed his responsibilities representing us with voting on the floor. Rob Gottheim, who is his district director here in New York, someone I've known dealt with for many years. Thank you for making this happen with us and for coordinating all of it. I know there's a lot of staff time that's involved and maybe a few other things other than just Steve Anderson's emails to answer, although I can't imagine why you delay that too much. But we really appreciate you making that happen, and to the staff. For those who are on YouTube, we're really glad you're here, and we want to remind you that you can ask a question, you can make a comment in the chat there, and we will try to be as responsive as is possible. Like a lot of things that are live, you wait for the guest now and hope they come very soon. And I understand there's the tunnel and crossing the street to get to the office. And I expect that the congressman will join us and pop on any moment. This is called the filling in the time segment, where the producer gets nervous and hopes the guest really shows up and throws it to someone like Rob Gottheim, who is the district director for the congressman, meaning he is in the district, in the place where we all live, as opposed to being in Washington, where a lot of the other staff is doing.
I'm happy to fill some time too. I mean, welcome everybody. I've been with the congressman for just a little while, 26 years. I worked for him. I worked when Linda Rosenthal, our assemblywoman on the Upper West Side, and I worked together for the congressman. But I've been his district director for a number of years. I'm also an Upper West Side resident. I live on 79th in Amsterdam. I'm coming to you live from my apartment on 79th in Amsterdam too.
All right, thanks, Rob. I think Rob, we're going to thank you for
Sure.
giving us that introduction, because I believe that the congressman is going to join us. I'm hoping so. About now. Hannah, are you there, or is it?
Hannah's in our district office. So Hannah's one of my staff members who works in the district. So she's not in Washington.
She's not in Washington. Good evening, Hannah. We're glad to have you anyway, even if you aren't the congressman who's our guest that we're waiting for. Who else has a thought that they would like to share with our membership and our neighbors at this time? We've got a lot of folks who are on our board and members who are present. Anyone have a thought that they would like to share with our audience of people who are on YouTube and maybe not as familiar with the work of the coalition?
Steve, I was wondering if perhaps you or Liz would want to tell particularly some of the new viewers and listeners what other forums this is part of a group of other people that we've had come to speak, and just give a sense of again what this is part of.
Yeah, you make a good point, Donald. If you go to our website at upperwestsidecoalition.org, you'll be able to see the YouTube recordings when the 3 commanding officers of the 3 police precincts on the Upper West Side join us and talk about public safety issues, which obviously are at the core issues of people being concerned about, that we have great concerns about. Most recently, the sanitation commissioner came on, Commissioner Tisch, and talked to us about the sanitation issues that are in fact beyond simply rats, okay, to do with garbage collections and street restaurants and sheds and all of these things, which was very good. The people from the Cannabis Control Board, obviously an issue that is now become more prominent in our community and more challenging, quite frankly, gave us a preamble before they actually issued the first of the licenses to both growers and then subsequently to the retailers. So that is another thing. Ellen, can I indulge and ask you, put you on the spot? We welcome you as one of the newest members of the coalition, a community organization doing incredible work focused upon seniors. Many of us are seniors. I've jokingly said this is a naturally occurring retirement center, the entire Upper West Side, and it is happening. And we're glad to have your organization join us and participate in our activities. So some people may not be as familiar with Dorot.
Yeah.
So you might give us just a little 30-second explanation.
Sure. I would love to do that. Thank you. Stephen, thank you for finding Dorot and getting to me so that Dorot could join this organization. We're definitely in the heart of this community. Our offices are at 171 West 85th Street, right near the corner of Amsterdam. Dorot has been around we're going on 50 years very soon. We were started by a group of Columbia students who recognized that older adults on the Upper West Side, and I know the Upper West Side was a different place than it is now, but that older adults were isolated, sitting on park benches by themselves, and we didn't have quite the infrastructure that we have now for older adults. And so Dorot came in and built up a range of programs. So Dorot means generations in Hebrew. So our mission is to build social connections among older adults, to help older adults remain independent for as long as possible, to give them the supports they need, and to bring generations together. So we've got a lot of missions going on.
Thank you.
there.
Thanks so much, Ellen, for putting you on the spot. I believe you have shared some vital information. And I believe that we're going to be joined now by our guest,
Great.
Congressman Nadler. Are you there? Please be there. Okay,
Hi.
there you are. Well, we understand you were delayed by some very important business. We mean no disrespect. We mean affection and support and recognition when we say Jerry Nadler, because I know that what happened in November was a great election victory, and now there are these other people on the other side of the park that you also have to represent. But in fact, at least tonight, you're all ours on the Upper West Side, as you've been for so many years, and we welcome you. We appreciate you joining us. We are a group of block associations and community groups and community entities, and we seek to do all sorts of good stuff for the people who are our neighbors and we care about. And you're part of that whole wonderful group of people who are the leaders we turn to. So welcome. And if you'd like to provide some opening comments before we throw at you every question we can think of?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to join my friends and neighbors on the Upper West Side. I love participating in events like this, and I've always found it to be a great opportunity to hear from constituents about the issues impacting you and your priorities and talk a little bit about what I'm working on. I thought I'd take a few minutes to talk about some of the incredible accomplishments that Democrats achieved in our first 2 years under President Biden, discuss my priorities, and then really open it up to you to hear what your main issues are, both federal and local, and take any questions. As President Biden, someone saying something? As President Biden highlighted in the State of the Union last month, President Biden and congressional Democrats have created 12 million jobs, more than any other administration has created in 4 years. I'm also proud that we passed the largest transportation and infrastructure bill ever, with the bipartisan infrastructure bill that will see over $28 billion going to New York alone. Hundreds of millions of dollars have already been allocated to New York to improve our clean water infrastructure, repair our bridges, and complete the Gateway project. Because of the largest climate investment in history, including the Inflation Reduction Act, working families have access to affordable, renewable home appliances and electric vehicles, and we're on a path to achieving the president's goal of 80% clean electricity by 2030. Although we need to go further to cover more people, I'm proud that due to the Inflation Reduction Act, seniors on Medicare now pay no more than $35 a month out of pocket for insulin, and Affordable Care Act enrollment is at a record high. We're looking to extend that not just to seniors, but to everyone. And for the first time, we enabled Medicare to negotiate the prices of drugs. Although we need to go further to cover more, while work is needed, I'm proud that we passed the most meaningful gun violence prevention legislation in nearly 30 years with the Safer Communities Act. While it was unfortunately less ambitious than the legislation I led to the House floor last Congress, every step toward protecting our communities and our children from gun violence is a step in the right direction. Finally, I'm proud that 8 of the bills I authored were signed into law by the President, including the Respect for Marriage Act, which codified marriage equality at the federal level. It took me 13 years to pass that one. And the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which ensures that employers must provide reasonable accommodations to pregnant employees to allow them to continue working while maintaining healthy pregnancies. That one took me 10 years. While I am proud of these accomplishments, there is so much more work that needs to be done at the federal level. We must expand voting rights, codify the right to abortion, pass comprehensive immigration reform, defend LGBTQ people from attacks nationwide, and continue to crack down on big pharma to lower prescription drug prices. Democrats must also hold the line against House Republicans, who are becoming more extreme by the day. As the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, my committee will defend against Jim Jordan's baseless investigations and attacks and guard against any attempts to weaken Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. Democrats will be a strong opposition party against these extreme MAGA Republican ideas that would hurt Americans everywhere, as well as a proposition party. Now, I'd like to turn to local issues. Let me, before I get to local issues, let me mention also that, as you know, we're facing a debt ceiling crisis. The Republicans are threatening not to raise the debt ceiling and throw the country into default. Now, the debt ceiling, as I'm sure many of you know, we must raise the debt ceiling not to incur more debt, but to pay the debt we've already incurred, and not to raise it. Frankly, we ought to get rid of it entirely. We're one of 4 countries that has it, and it really makes no sense. But not to raise it would throw the economy into depression. The Republicans are threatening to do just that unless they get very severe budget cuts, and the budget cuts, they haven't outlined it in detail, but the budget cuts they say they want is basically 70% cuts in all discretionary federal spending, other than Medicare and Social Security, which is not discretionary. Turning to local issues, let me start with one of our least favorite things, tourist helicopters. For the last 10 years, our city has seen increased numbers of non-essential tourism and commuter helicopters. Helicopter-related noise complaints to 311 have gone up in New York City by over 2,300% in the last 5 years. And helicopter safety, noise, and environmental concerns are now one of the top issues I hear about from my constituents. And that's both east and west sides. The overwhelming number of helicopter flights over New York City creates intolerable risks to the community and negative impacts on the quality of life for all of our residents. For this reason, I introduced the Improving Helicopter Safety Act of 2021 to prohibit non-essential helicopter flights over New York City. I've also written to the FAA several times, most recently in 2019, requesting that the agency issue temporary flight restrictions to prohibit non-essential helicopter flights over the city. Despite requests for action from the majority of the New York City congressional delegation, the FAA has failed to take meaningful steps to address these issues. I'm working closely with the advocacy group Stop the Chop, my colleagues in Congress, and the Biden administration to force the FAA's hand. I recently introduced the Safe and Quiet Skies Act to improve safety and reduce community disruption from commercial air tours nationwide. With Congress due to take up the FAA reauthorization this year, my staff and I are working hard to ensure that the Safe and Quiet Skies Act and other New York City-focused bills to limit tourism helicopters are included. I'm also having conversations with the FAA about seaplanes. Last week, I reintroduced legislation to finally close the funding gap in the World Trade Center Health Program. While I am proud to have worked with Senator Gillibrand to secure $1 billion for the program last year, the program still faces a substantial funding gap and excludes some Pentagon and Shanksville responders. As a member of the Congressional SALT Caucus, I am fighting to restore the state and local tax deduction to cut taxes and help make life more affordable for millions of middle-class families in high-tax states. SALT was unfairly targeted in the Trump tax bill, and it must be restored. Since 2019, the House has passed legislation 3 times to restore the SALT deduction, but the Senate has not acted. I will continue working this Congress to get SALT across the finish line. Finally, I'm working closely with the mayor's office on a number of issues that are important to the city. I worked with Senator Schumer to create a new $800 million pot of FEMA grant money to assist the city with asylum seekers. I'm also working to get the city the funding for food security programs, public housing, and more in this year's appropriations process. There's a lot more I could say, but I'd like to hear from you and answer any questions at this now.
Well, thanks very much for that. We're going to follow up on the chopper issue with Melissa in a moment, but I want to just kick this off by getting your thoughts on this. If there is one issue that is really one raised by so many people on the Upper West Side, it is concern over public safety. It is the worry that people are not safe on the street, that seniors are feeling that they are potential victims, that the increasing concern that what is happening in our community is reminiscent of previous years gone by that we thought were gone, and that there is an anxiety level that maybe it's not as bad as it could be, as it is in other precincts, we understand. But with the fewer police on the street, fewer police in the precinct than there were years ago, and the escalating numbers, the data, there is a significant concern about public safety. And we know it's not federal legislation necessarily that you can work on, but it's an issue that is, I think, a primary concern to many people. And we'd welcome your thoughts on that.
Well, there is federal legislation that we have worked on, that I'm continuing to work on. I mentioned one of them, which is to get the guns off our streets. New York can have the best gun laws in the world, but if someone can legally bring them into North Carolina and they come across the state lines, it doesn't help. So we need a federal gun control legislation. As I mentioned, we passed a very mild version. I'm working to pass a much stronger version. We need more money for mental health, which is a lot of the problems. And we need police reform so that people trust the police and will confide in them, because we know that there's a lot of mistrust of police officers around the country. Now, we've given a lot of money to New York. It's up to the mayor to allocate those funds, and we've given a lot of discretionary money. The mayor's got to allocate that as he sees fit, and the city council. I mean, they have a role too. in terms of how much goes to police and how much goes to mental health and how much goes to whatever.
Thank you.
And I should say one other thing, by the way. It's cold comfort. The fact is that the crime levels now are far, far lower than they were in the 1990s. For what it's worth.
I hear you. So when we announced that we would be holding this forum with you, we asked people if they wanted to send in questions and raise issues. And the number one issue that people sent in comments and questions about did concern helicopters. Now, that is also a testament to Melissa's advocacy that we focus upon this issue and that we demand attention. So I want to turn it to Melissa for a follow-up on your guidance that you offered at the start of this meeting about the progress in addressing this issue. Melissa?
Thank you so much, Steve, and wonderful to see you again, Congressman Nadler. Thanks for this opportunity. So Congressman Nadler, you did answer some of my prepared questions, but as a follow-up, yes, this is an issue that is impacting Upper West Siders, but also New Yorkers throughout your district and beyond, Long Island, Westchester, the Hamptons, as well as folks in North Jersey. So you have reintroduced the Safe and Quiet Skies Act, which is wonderful. That's more of a national bill. And then there's the two more locally centric bills. One you had mentioned that was introduced in 2021. That's the Improving Helicopter Safety Act, which would ban the non-essentials over the New York City area. So will that be reintroduced this term? And then there was another act as well, the Helicopter Safety and Noise Management Act, that would create a New York, New Jersey bi-state commission to substantially reduce the New York City area helicopter traffic. And will that act be introduced this term? And then finally, just to tie it all together.
Wait a minute, one thing at a time, because I'm going to
Sure.
questions. The first is included in the bill that I mentioned that was reintroduced, the Safe Skies Act. And that covers, I think, everything you're talking about. There is one thing that the city could do that lobby the mayor for, and that is this. These helicopters use the heliports on the east and west side. At least it would go a long way toward helping with this problem. The city simply did not renew those leases. They can still come in, excuse me, from New Jersey, but it would go a very long way to greatly reducing the number of helicopters.
Absolutely.
And Congressman, if I could just add to that really quick, we are planning on introducing the air management plan legislation. We have been working with the Transportation Infrastructure Committee to find the best way to get that into FAA reauthorization, which is due to be taken up by the committee this year. We have spoken to Congresswoman Velasquez about the other bill, and we'll continue to do that. But we do plan on both of those bills being reintroduced, in addition to Safe and Quiet Skies, and in addition to all the other work we're doing, in terms of the FAA and National Park Service issue, and talking to the city about their concession contracts with
Who works on this legislation?
with operators.
Andrew is a legislative director with the congressman's office, so that's why he was able to provide. Thanks, Andrew. Melissa,
Yeah,
did you have something? Did you have something else? One other follow-up?
No, I just did want to mention that there is a city council bill that, if passed, would do what Congressmember Nadler mentioned, with regard to the two city-owned heliports. So we support that, and it has close to, I think, 27 co-sponsors already. And so we would like to see more co-sponsors, obviously, of your bills. And how could the language of those bills get inserted in some way, shape, or form into that FAA Reauthorization Act of this year? Because every 5 years they reauthorize it. So that's
we're going to be working on that. This is the best opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you. Liz DeVito has been monitoring the YouTube chat, and I think there's a follow-up also regarding choppers that Liz was going to pass on to us.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Congressman, someone from our audience in the YouTube audience has asked a question. Can we sue the FAA for negligence? For example, a class action lawsuit?
I don't think so. The FAA is a regulatory body, and within the law, they can regulate, and I don't think there's any grounds for a lawsuit.
Okay, let's go to Neil Burson, who is one of our directors from the West 90s organization. Neil has a different topic about Amtrak. Go ahead, Neil.
Good evening, Congressman Nadler. Nice to see you again. You may be aware that Amtrak North runs under a large section of Riverside Park, and there has been over the last 2 years significant signs of some danger signals on the surface areas, what they call the overbuild of the park, especially between 96th Street and 116th Street, where at the places where the expansion joints are, there's been degradation, and they've had to fence off those spots to avoid danger to pedestrians and other vehicular traffic, the enforcement police, et cetera. So the question I have for you is, do you know what, if anything, Amtrak has done to shore up the tunnel below and prevent it from collapsing? We're all very concerned about what happened in Pittsburgh and that bridge, and we don't want to see any kind of calamity like that happen here.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Riverside Park was built over the pre-existing tracks. I don't know if Amtrak is aware of the problem. We can certainly tell them and pressure them to deal with it.
Well, that would be great. We'd love your support in doing that. We know that Riverside Park's Conservancy is aware of it, and some funds have been allocated to try to address the surface issues.
Allocated by whom?
By the city.
The surface issue. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. We're talking about the tracks underneath.
Yeah.
I would add, this is Robert Gottheim with the Congressman. I'm not sure it's Amtrak's responsibility. It could be the New York City Department of Parks' responsibility, because Parks built the, over it. So it's a question of who owns that. It actually might be a city responsibility and not an Amtrak.
Thank you. I want to go to Mark Diller, who has a rail and freight related issue, which is one of the issues that I know the Congressman has been working on for, it feels like, about 25 years. Mark.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Congressman and staff for being so generous with your time tonight. The Congressman has been a huge supporter of the third tunnel project into Penn Station, and I won't burden you with the issues of Penn Station itself, although there are many and fraught. That's more of a local issue, unless the governor has her way. But I would welcome an update on both the rail tunnel, and then at one point the Congressman spoke publicly about a freight route that could greatly facilitate the flow of goods in and out of our city, which has to be great for our economy. So I would welcome an update on either or both of those topics.
I'll tell you both of them. I don't remember the exact figure, but a fairly large sum of money in the infrastructure bill was allocated for the CREATE tunnel, for the CREATE project, which is to increase the flow and modernize across the Hudson River into, from New Jersey into Penn Station. As to the freight, I've been working on that since 1979, my second term in the Assembly. And that the idea there is a rail line that curves through Queens and Brooklyn. It actually goes from the Hellgate Bridge through Queens, through Fresh Pond Junction into Brooklyn, and stops at the water's edge. The idea, and it's used today by one freight train a day, basically. The idea is to build the tunnel connecting the Bay Ridge terminus to a landfall on the New Jersey side on the border between Bayonne and Jersey City. That would, there are a lot of reasons for doing that. Let's just say that New York is the only major city in North America which never connected its port to the mainland. As a result of that, for rail freight to get across the Hudson River to New York, it's got to go up to a bridge at Selkirk, 12 miles south of Albany, and then down the other side, it's 280 miles. It's called the Selkirk Hurdle. It's completely uneconomic. Doesn't happen. The result is that everything gets transferred by truck and it comes in over the George Washington Bridge, which is why the South Bronx has the worst asthma rate in the world. It's also terribly carbon expensive. You know, it puts out a lot of carbonization, obviously, and it also tears up our highways and roads. And most cities get a, anyway, so the idea is to build that tunnel. And for a number of years, the Regional Plan Association opposed it because they wanted to use the freight line for passengers. As it turns out, the initial EIS that we did shows that they're completely compatible. You can do both. So we are doing both, or we are in the process of doing both. We're in a stage 2 environmental impact statement, which should be finished in about 2 years. That will do all the engineering. We'll estimate the cost and we'll propose a method of paying for it. Obviously, it's going to involve a lot of federal funds, and that's where that project is. I should tell you, by the way, that the Port Authority was established in 1921 to build that tunnel. And actually, someone sent me a picture recently of Mayor Highland dedicating the groundbreaking in 1923. Well, it never went much further than that, but it's about time.
Let me pass on a question sent in to us from Sheila Kendrick, one of our neighbors. She says, regarding gun violence, which you touched upon here, isn't it possible to pass a law to eliminate all automatic rifles? To simply eliminate automatic rifles and get it passed despite the obvious NRA objection to any gun restrictions?
Well, we passed that, a bill that did that, among other things, did that, and quite a few other things, in the Judiciary Committee and in fact in the House last year. Couldn't get through the Senate, and the Republicans will never allow it to go anywhere. We'll pass that bill when we get a Democratic House and President and Senate with enough Democratic senators to eliminate the filibuster. And I don't say overcome the filibuster, because that means 60 senators. We've had 52 senators, not counting Manchin and Sinipa, who will not vote against the filibuster. But we've had 51 votes to abolish the filibuster, and a Democratic House and Senate. We could get all that stuff through.
As I mentioned to you, the issue of public safety is obviously a very big one on the Upper West Side. Here's Cynthia on 67th Street. She says, I just don't see enough police officers in the street. And isn't there anything you can do to get increased support for the NYPD and greater presence? Of course, her concern is on the Upper West Side, but wherever it is needed.
We've given a lot of discretionary funds to the city of New York. It's up to the mayor and the city council to allocate them. So you ought to talk to the mayor and the city council members about putting more of that discretionary money into the police.
You can sense the frustration. You can sense the frustration, though, of people who are worried.
And on the federal level, we've given the city a lot of money, and it's up to the city. We don't tell the city within certain limits. I mean, we say this is for criminal justice, so we don't tell the city in detail what to do with it. That's for local. That's why you have a city council.
Okay, I want to switch to Dale Brown from West 79th Street Block Association, the leader there and the vice president of our coalition, to talk about housing.
Congressman Nadler, thank you so much for joining us this evening and taking time out of your busy schedule. we have a long-term serious issue on the Upper West Side with regards to affordable housing. Please advise us as to what steps you are taking to create affordable housing now, not something 5 years down the lane, but happening right now. We're desperate. Thank you.
Well, the only way, I mean, there are a number of things that should be done in no particular order. Number one is good cause eviction. I assume you know what that is. That's on the state level. We can do it on the federal level too. We're trying to do that on the federal level.
Can you explain that for our audience? Because
Yes.
not all of us are as familiar.
Good
with
cause
what that
eviction
means.
says that a landlord may not evict a tenant except for good cause, because he or she has refused to pay the rent or destroyed property or whatever, and puts a limit on rent increases. That's excuse me. That's good cause eviction. It's in front of the state legislature, and we're trying to do it on the federal level. Again, the Republicans, we're not going to succeed on the federal level until we have two Democratic houses. But the state legislature is very seriously considering it, and the politics there may be right for it. Secondly, you've got to increase the supply of housing in order to bring the price down. Now, the governor has proposed a very good plan to increase the size of housing, to increase the amount of housing. It's not applicable within New York City, but it will impact New York City. And that is to say, to overrule or replace local zoning in suburban areas, which limits the amount of housing you can put down. What she has proposed, which is a very good proposal, that is the governor, is that at Long Island Railroad stops or Metro North stops, they create hubs of new housing. This would violate suburban local zoning laws, and which seek to keep, houses on 1 acre lots or whatever. And she wants the power to override that. That's before the legislature. I frankly don't know why she needs the legislative approval, since I've always thought that the 1968 Urban Development Act that Governor Rockefeller passed gave what is now called the ESDC, the Empire State Development Corporation, the right to override local zoning, but apparently the governor and the legislature doesn't think they have that power, so she's proposing it, and that it will take some time, because it takes time to build housing. But the only solution is to build enough housing so that you bring the market, so that the market goes down, the price goes down, because the goods are less scarce.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liz, is there a YouTube question that we can share? And I know you also had a question of your own that you wanted to pose.
Oh, well, there's one more thought that has come in about the helicopter issue. And this person is wondering, her name is Becca Franks, if because the noise and emissions from helicopters also impacts wildlife. And so has there any thought been given to involving the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, or a similar body, in this fight, in this struggle?
No, it's very clear that under federal law, the FAA is in charge.
Okay.
Require legislation targets that.
Okay, great. Thank you for the answer.
Liz, did you want to share another question that you had?
Yeah, there were a couple of people who wanted to know, with the current events in Israel top of mind, and there have been some incidences of anti-Semitic actions on the Upper West Side. If you had any thoughts or comments to share with Upper West Siders about, the possibility of more anti-Semitic actions, or there was some graffiti on a restaurant shed recently. Anyway,
raised two different issues.
Okay.
Anti-Semitic incidents have been rising greatly, as have anti-Asian hate crimes in New York and frankly around the country. The solution for that, to the extent there is a solution, anti-Semitism is 2,000-year-old, the oldest prejudice, is more education, and more education, basically. Now, you also referenced Israel, and that's a separate question. What's going on in Israel now, where there's a real threat to democratic government, and you see 200,000 people demonstrating in the streets of Tel Aviv. We're trying to influence that. I wrote an article in Haaretz a few weeks ago, and we're circulating a letter among the Jewish members of the House, which we hope to publish tomorrow or Friday at the latest, suggesting that there has to be compromise, that Israel cannot go ahead with the proposals that the Netanyahu government, with its extreme right-wing members, is making, because that would destroy democracy, as well as implement, frankly, well, leave it at that. Do some other very bad things too, but leave it at that.
Will that letter be published? Will the public be able to see that tomorrow?
Tomorrow or Friday.
Okay. All right, great. I'll look for it. Thank you.
Let me switch to another topic that
It'll be by the Jewish members or those Jewish members who sign it.
Okay.
The concern for seniors on the Upper West Side. Obviously, the pandemic was an especially challenging time for many people who were limited in mobility, limited in many other ways, and especially seniors, of which I and several others on this call are technically members.
So am I.
And you. I didn't want to say that. It's up to you to self-identify that way. But we really don't have a tremendous amount of resources to make available to large numbers of seniors who could use more help. And I don't hear that talked about very much. And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it isn't talked about very much, but it is very much on our minds in Washington. We've been struggling to increase appropriations. Help. It's very difficult. The budget negotiations are very difficult now, especially with the threat of the debt ceiling. Remember I said that the Republicans want to say they don't want to touch Medicare and Medicaid or defense, but they want to make huge cuts. And what they're talking about is 70% cuts in all discretionary spending, which means senior spending, among other discretionary spending. We're obviously going to fight this.
We hope so. Aaron, did you have a question that you wanted to pose to the congressman? You are muted. You need to unmute.
Hello, Congressman. I wanted to ask you, you must be familiar with the congestion plan.
Yep.
And if it materializes, we think that it's, and probably we are not the only one, that the Upper West Side is going to turn into a gigantic parking lot. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, I have always supported congestion pricing. It's essential to finance subways, the MTA. And there is a group, government body, Rob, who my staff knows in more detail, to fill it in, that is in charge, and they haven't come out with their recommendations yet, of coming up with such exceptions and safeguards to prevent that from happening and to prevent other possible untoward effects. Rob, you want to comment on that?
Sure, I'm happy to comment. Obviously, you know, as the congressman said, he very much supports congestion pricing we needed for the subways. We're also inundated with truck traffic. Obviously, there will be, we have to ensure that the Upper West Side doesn't become a parking lot and that people don't try to park here. But that's, you know, a lot of the experts believe that when they find that there are no parking spots on the Upper West Side, that traffic won't be coming here. There are no garages that people are going to be able to park in. They're not just going to come to the 60th Street line and try to park. So we have to ensure that that doesn't happen and work. I mean, others are looking at both the discounts to residents, the exemption to residents. The city council is even looking at something that's been kicked around for a long time, residential parking permits too, to make that better for residents who live here and pay taxes here. And we have to ensure that people don't come to the Upper West Side to try to park either. So right now, congestion pricing is not approved by USDOT. It has to go through the EIS. It's been delayed. We don't know the status of that because we don't want to increase particulate matter. But we desperately need the money, and the subways desperately need the money. So we're going to be watching closely. That's all.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Congressman. You mentioned the issue of asylum seekers and migrants in New York. It's disturbing to a lot of people. There are local people who are trying to help families who find themselves here. How they got here, they're not quite sure themselves, some of them. Obviously, we don't need to go through the politicization of what's happened with buses and all of that stuff, but it's a crisis. It's a crisis. And I wonder what you feel is being done and what should be done and what we need to know about and how we can be participants in perhaps part of the solution.
Well, comes being told I should move closer to the microphone. We have to give asylum to people who legitimately claim asylum by reason of fear of persecution, et cetera. That's international law, and it's certainly American law that was enacted in 1948 because of the refusal during World War II to give Jews the ability to escape the Holocaust and to come here. That St. Louis was turned back. I'm sure you know all that. So we have an obligation legally to give asylum. But there has to be a legitimate need for that asylum. The judgment for that need is made by immigration courts, which are greatly overburdened. And so I supported legislation to greatly increase the number of immigration judges so we can make those decisions much more quickly, and those who don't legitimately need asylum can be sent out of the country. Secondly, we have to act in some of the countries where the asylum, which are generating the most asylum, especially in Central America, we have to help them to alleviate the conditions. A lot of people who come here claiming asylum are really economic refugees. They're from a human point of view, we should admit them. From a legal point of view, we can't, and from a physical point of view, we can't admit limitless numbers of people. So we have devoted funds, and we should devote more funds to try to alleviate the problems in those Central American countries and in Venezuela, not only Central American countries.
This is a community with many people whose family roots were people who immigrated seeking a better life. So it's ironic we should be the staging ground for this yet again.
Well, it's even more ironic. I mean, because we're going to have to adjust our laws. The fact is that we need more workers. We have an aging population. The birth rate, a replacement birth rate is 2.1 per woman. Our birth rate now is about 1.5 or 1.6, which means our population is going to start declining, and it's going to be aging, and the ratio of people in their earning years to people on pensions, is going to go. It's going to be far more pensions. The ratio is going to go way down. So we should be seeking now. Every developed country in the world has the same problem. Most have no solutions. We have a solution. People want to come here. People don't want to go to China or to Russia. They do want to come here. So we have to adjust our immigration laws for that. But that'll take adjustment of our laws.
You are obviously in the thick of it with the challenges on Capitol Hill and the battle between parties and all that. Are you optimistic that actually there is some common ground that we're going to come to with some sensible answers? Because to a lot of people, it seems an almost hopeless deadlock situation with little to be done until we get through the next cycle of national elections.
Most things, that's correct. There are some things on which we can probably forge agreement, on things that are usually controversial. On my committee, judiciary, the things like intellectual property, there are some areas there that protecting some American corporations against unfair foreign competition, things like that. Beyond that, no, the parties are further divided than they've been at any point in American history, with the exception of just before the Civil War. And there's going to be no agreement on most issues until period. The other thing is that this country needs two parties. It needs a center-left party, the Democrats, and a center-right party, the Republicans. But we don't have that anymore. The Democratic Party is still a center-left party. The Republican Party's become a cult group. And that was said by Norm Ornstein of the American Enterprise Institute, who is which is a right of center organization. But the Republican Party's become a cult group. And the only way that's going to change, and we're going to have a reasonable two-party system again, is for them to lose a whole succession of elections. Hopefully that'll happen. Hopefully that party will be reformed. The only way parties really change is by losing a succession of elections. And then hopefully the country will be less divided. But that's going to take time.
So we are.
And we also, the
Yes,
other thing is, I should mention, is that we've come to a situation where you've got an ecosystem. Fox News, which is not a legitimate news organization, as has been very clear in recent revelations, but we knew that. But almost half the country gets its news from Fox or Newsmax or OAN, and they live in a different universe. And now, if, and I do expect this if to be when at this point, when Dominion wins a very large judgment against Fox, because Fox was not only lying, but was knowingly lying about Dominion's voting machines, maybe that'll start changing.
So we're going to start to wrap up here, but we're among the most fortunate, and those of us who get to live on the Upper West Side and have businesses on the Upper West Side, and our kids go to school, and I remind myself that we're the people who banged the pots and pans at 7:00 during the pandemic to remind ourselves about what it was to be out there, to be an essential worker, to be part of a community. And we are a community, and we want to, through block associations and community groups, raise issues, discuss issues, share information. It's almost like a support group for our community. And I think many of us are very hopeful and positive about working together. And you're one of us, and you're an Upper West Sider, and you're our congressman. And I wonder what your outlook is about your big perspective on, as Ed Koch, the late former mayor, used to say, how am I doing? How do you think we're doing here in New York City? And what ought we to be doing in the big picture, as opposed to the details of policy and administrative things? So what's your take on that?
I think New York is doing reasonably well. I have some differences with some of the things the city administration is doing, but that's not neither here nor there. I think the city is doing reasonably well, given the overall problems of the country. I think that New York is, as always, resilient.
Thank you, neighbors. Thank you, friends. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you to your staff for being here. And we appreciate you candidly having a conversation with your neighbors. And that's what this is all about. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.